Right now, there is an AI model built in some heavily guarded boardroom in San Francisco, and it is actively negotiating billion-dollar merger agreements.
Yeah. And at the exact same time, there's a competing model built halfway across the world that is completely rewriting the economics of the internet for, like, fractions of a penny.
It's wild. Welcome to the deep dive. So, it is April 29, 2026, and if you're listening to this, you already know that artificial intelligence is no longer, an app you download or some website you visit. It's the operating system for human knowledge.
Right. And that transition from just being an application to becoming literal infrastructure that changes the stakes entirely. I mean, if you've been following the space, you know we spent the last few years totally obsessed with the Turing test.
Oh, yeah, like who has the smartest chatbot?
Exactly. Who could pass the bar exam with a higher percentile, that kind of thing. But the landscape we're looking at today in our sources, it has abandoned that framing completely.
Oh.
We are looking at a multi-front war fought over things like enterprise liability, API routing architectures, silicon supply chains, and this aggressive, almost predatory cost disruption.
Yeah, if you think of AI like the early days of personal computing, we aren't just looking at who makes the best monitor anymore. We are watching three completely different philosophies fight to become the operating system for human knowledge.
It's a great analogy.
And the sources for this deep dive lay out three main characters. You have OpenAI, right? The American pioneer trying to weave itself into the fabric of everything you do. Then you have Anthropic, the American safety-first enterprise darling, monetizing just absolute reliability. And finally, you have DeepSeek, the low-cost disruptor out of China that's threatening to commoditize the entire multi-trillion-dollar market.
Yeah, they're playing totally different games.
They really are. So if we want to figure out who actually leads the future of this AI infrastructure, we got to start with the reigning king of consumer AI. We need to understand what OpenAI is trying to build.
Right, and OpenAI's philosophy, based on all the current data, is just maximum ubiquity. They are attempting to build the universal platform, not a service, but the foundational layer for, well, everything.
Like the bedrock.
Exactly. I mean, we all know their mass adoption strategy with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
But the pivot they've made into multimodal intelligence, text, image, video, agents, and deeply integrating that into everyday tools via the Microsoft ecosystem.
Like Office, Windows, Azure.
Right. That is what defines their 2026 strategy. They're aiming for ambient computing.
Okay, ambient computing. Meaning, like, I don't go to OpenAI. OpenAI is just the water I swim in.
Yes.
So if I open a spreadsheet, it's already there. If I'm managing server loads in Azure, it's just there.
Precisely. To use an analogy, you don't open an app called electricity before you turn on your TV, right?
Right, you just plug it in.
The power is just there in the wall. OpenAI wants the GPT-5 series, specifically GPT 5.4 right now, to be the utility grid for cognitive labor.
Wow.
If you look at the deployment of GPT 5.4, it's not just about generating text anymore. It's an agentic system.
Right, the agents.
Yeah, it's independently navigating across disparate applications. It's reading an email, drafting a response, checking your calendar, generating a video asset, and executing a marketing campaign.
All without you doing anything.
Exactly. Without human intervention between those steps.
Okay, let's unpack this, though, because I look at their strategy. They have Microsoft, they have the brand name, but the sources note they're facing some serious slowing investor demand and high costs.
Yeah, massive cost.
Are they basically building a massive luxury hotel that's just too expensive to keep the lights on? I mean, they want to power 1 billion daily active users doing complex, multi-step agentic workflows. The sheer compute for that is mind-boggling.
It is. It's the pioneer's dilemma. And the vulnerability you're pointing to there is inference cost.
Okay, break that down for us.
So when we talk about AI overhead, people historically fixated on training costs, right? The billions it takes to train a frontier model. But training is a one-time sunk cost.
You pay it once and you're done.
Exactly. Inference, on the other hand, the compute required every single time a user hits enter, or an agent initiates a task that is a recurring scaling nightmare.
Because GPT 5.4 is huge.
It's a massive, dense model. It requires a staggering amount of memory bandwidth and GPU clusters just to serve a single complex prompt. When your business model is be everything to everyone all the time, your inference costs scale linearly with your adoption.
Wait, so every time someone uses GPT 5.4 to summarize like a mundane grocery list, OpenAI is bleeding margin.
Pretty much, yeah. And that creates a massive vulnerability in enterprise competition.
Oh, I see.
Because if OpenAI is burdened with the staggering overhead of subsidizing 1 billion consumer interactions, it becomes very difficult to price aggressively for the enterprise clients who actually drive the sustainable revenue.
Because they have to make up the loss somewhere.
Right. And investors are looking at this massive capital expenditure required to maintain this universal platform, and they're comparing it to the more targeted, highly profitable approaches of companies that don't have to support a consumer loss leader.
Which perfectly brings us to the second major player in the sources. Because if OpenAI's vulnerability is cost, and the sheer bloat of trying to be everything to everyone, Anthropic seems to have designed their entire corporate structure to capitalize on exactly those anxieties.
Oh, absolutely.
They have completely abandoned the consumer hype cycle and just walked straight into the boardroom.
Anthropic's pivot is, frankly, one of the most fascinating strategic maneuvers in recent tech history. They are not chasing the average consumer. They are building the trusted enterprise vault.
Right.
Their philosophy is built entirely around reliability, alignment, which is ethical behavior, and enterprise-grade performance.
And the financials coming out of this are staggering. The sources say their revenue surged from roughly a $9 billion annual run rate to a $30 billion annual run rate.
It's explosive growth.
And their secondary valuation just reached around $1 trillion. They're actively surpassing OpenAI in investor hype.
Yeah, the market is obsessed with them right now.
But here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. Put yourself in the shoes of a CEO making a purchasing decision. Anthropic is actually more expensive, and they have a smaller ecosystem than OpenAI. Why are investors throwing a $1 trillion valuation at them? Is safety just a corporate buzzword for won't embarrass the company?
It sounds like a buzzword until you look at how enterprise risk models actually work. You really have to discard the consumer definition of safety here.
Okay, how so?
In the public sphere, safety usually means alignment, like preventing the AI from generating harmful instructions or biased text. But in a Fortune 500 context, safety means liability mitigation. It means zero variance.
Because if a consumer chatbot hallucinates a historical fact, it's just a funny screenshot on social media.
Right.
But if an enterprise AI hallucinates a regulatory compliance clause in a pharmaceutical merger, the company loses hundreds of millions of dollars and faces federal probes.
Exactly. Anthropic isn't selling a conversational partner. They're selling mathematical predictability. And they achieve this through what they call safety-first scaling.
Which means what, under the hood?
They lean heavily on constitutional AI. So the model is trained to self-critique its outputs based on a rigid set of explicit principles, rather than relying solely on the somewhat messy, subjective process of human feedback.
So it's checking its own work against a rulebook.
Yes, and that creates a highly bounded, predictable output. But it's not just the training, it's the hardware architecture, specifically how they manage working memory. We have to talk about Claude Opus 4.6 and these massive context windows.
Yeah, the sources highlight this as a huge differentiator.
Is their massive technical moat right now. Claude Opus 4.6 features a 1 million token context window. Now, for the technical audience, you know that scaling a context window isn't just a matter of slapping more RAM onto a server.
Right, it gets exponentially harder.
Exactly. The underlying architecture of these models relies on the attention mechanism, which historically has a quadratic cost.
So if you double the text, the cost doesn't just double.
No, it quadruples. If you double the amount of text the AI has to read at once, the computational power required to process the relationships between all those words shoots up quadratically. The math gets impossibly heavy, incredibly fast.
So how are they hitting 1 million tokens?
To get to a reliable 1 million token window, which is effectively dropping a 3,000-page legal discovery database into the AI's working memory all at once, Anthropic had to implement massive architectural breakthroughs. They prioritize long context reasoning over quick consumer adoption.
Which is exactly what a major law firm or a hedge fund actually wants. They don't want an AI that just read a quick summary of a document.
No, they need the details.
They want an AI that holds the entire repository of the firm's historical case law in its active memory while it drafts a new brief. That is why businesses pay premium dollars for Claude Code and these Opus models.
Yes. They are monetizing peace of mind for developers and large companies. And you have to look at who's backing them. Amazon and Google?
Huge players. It's massive, which deeply embeds Anthropic into AWS and Google Cloud infrastructure. They are essentially becoming the invisible, ultra-secure backend of the corporate internet.
Okay, so let's zoom out and look at the board so far. We have OpenAI burning compute to be the ubiquitous consumer platform. We have Anthropic charging premium prices to be the flawless enterprise brain.
Right.
Both of these strategies are super capital intensive.
Mm.
They both rely on massive revenue streams to justify these gigantic compute clusters. So what happens to both of their expensive premium business models when a third player enters the arena and just gives away 90% of the capability for a fraction of the cost?
Yeah, this is where the market just fractures. It is the innovator's dilemma playing out in real time. DeepSeek represents a completely different philosophy. They are the open source wrecking ball.
I love that phrase.
Their whole strategy is to make AI cheaper, open, and widely accessible. They want to make frontier-level intelligence so cheap that it ceases to be a premium product and just becomes a basic utility. So what does this all mean for the big guys? It sounds to me like OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to sell $100,000 sports cars, and DeepSeek just figured out how to mass-produce a reliable sedan for $500, and they're giving the blueprints away for free.
That's exactly what's happening.
How do you compete with free? Let's get into the mechanics of how DeepSeek actually pulls that off. The sources say DeepSeek v4 has 1.6 trillion parameters. It has a 1 million token context window. It sits only 3 to 6 months behind the frontier models.
It's incredibly capable.
Yet it costs a tiny fraction of what the others charge. How are they building this cheap sedan?
Well, the secret to DeepSeek's low cost isn't magic. It is extreme architectural efficiency. Specifically, they rely heavily on the mixture of experts or MOE architecture.
Break that down. Because a 1.6 trillion parameter model does not sound cheap to run.
Right, it wouldn't be if it were a dense model where every single parameter activates for every single word generated. That's what OpenAI struggles with. But with MOE, the model is fractured into dozens of smaller expert neural networks. When you send DeepSeek v4 a prompt, a routing network analyzes your query and only activates the 2 or 3 experts necessary to answer that specific question.
Oh, wow. So while the model contains 1.6 trillion parameters of knowledge, it might only use like 50 billion parameters of active compute to actually answer you.
Precisely. Add in fast iteration and aggressive open source development, and you have an incredibly fast, astonishingly cheap inference engine.
But there is a massive catch here, right? We have to balance this, because they aren't just achieving this through clever routing. The open source path is notoriously muddy, and the sources highlight some massive vulnerabilities for DeepSeek.
Oh, it's a total minefield. DeepSeek faces intense scrutiny, massive trust issues, regulatory hurdles, and serious allegations of model copying and IP violations.
Right, because the fastest way to train a highly capable model on a budget is to use synthetic data generated by the expensive models.
Exactly. It's called distillation. You prompt the premium models like GPT 5.4 millions of times to generate high-quality reasoning traces, coding examples, and complex outputs. And then you train your cheaper model on that data.
You essentially use OpenAI to teach DeepSeek how to be smart.
Yeah. And while DeepSeek has heavily optimized their architecture, competitors frequently point out that their rapid iteration is likely standing on the shoulders of the billions of dollars OpenAI and Anthropic spent on foundational research.
So they are the ultimate fast follower. They let the American companies spend $10 billion clearing a path through the jungle, and then they pave a highway right behind them.
That is one way to look at it, and it introduces immense geopolitical and trust issues for them in Western markets. But economically, it is highly disruptive.
Okay, so we know their philosophies, but how does this translate to the actual technology that you, the listener, might use today in 2026? Let's put their flagship models head-to-head on the tech battlefield.
Let's do it.
We've got GPT 5.4, Opus 4.6, and DeepSeek v4. If you, the listener, just want to summarize a 500-page legal document, the sources say Anthropic is your best bet.
Definitely.
But if you're asking an AI to independently act as a personal assistant across your apps, OpenAI wins. Expert, are we seeing the end of the one-size-fits-all AI?
What's fascinating here is that, yes, the monolithic model is entirely dead in the enterprise space. The architecture of 2026 is all about intelligent routing. Nobody just uses one model anymore.
Explain how that works in practice. Like, what does the context and reasoning battlefield actually look like for business?
Let's say you are running a massive e-commerce platform. You have a customer service chatbot, you have an internal system generating product descriptions, and you have an automated legal compliance engine reviewing vendor contracts.
Okay.
3 years ago, you might have tried to pipe all of that through OpenAI. Today, that would bankrupt you.
Because you'd be using GPT 5.4's massively expensive cognitive power to tell a customer where their tracking number is.
Exactly. So today, companies use sophisticated API routing gateways. When a query comes in, a smaller, ultra-fast model evaluates its complexity. If it's a basic high-volume task generating text, writing simple code, or translating a standard document, the gateway routes it to DeepSeek V4. You get 90% of the performance of the top two for practically zero cost.
Wow. But if the query is high stakes,
If the gateway detects a long document that needs cross-referencing, it routes the query to Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.6 to utilize that 1 million token working memory.
right.
And if the query requires an autonomous agent to jump across a user's calendar, email, and cloud storage to plan a multi-step project, it routes to OpenAI's GPT 5.4.
Because they have those advanced thinking models and superior tool integration. Let's pause on that, actually. We know Anthropic wins on massive working memory. But what exactly are OpenAI's thinking models doing differently?
So OpenAI has leaned heavily into what we call test-time compute, or chain-of-thought reasoning.
What does that mean?
Instead of just trying to predict the next word immediately based on pattern recognition, the model pauses. It generates hidden tokens, like an internal monologue, where it breaks the problem down into steps, critiques its own plan, and iterates before it ever shows you an answer.
So it's spending more compute during the generation phase to simulate human planning.
Exactly, and that makes it incredibly powerful for agentic tasks. But again, that test time compute costs money, hence the routing architecture. DeepSeek handles the volume, OpenAI handles the complex execution, and Anthropic handles the deep analysis and risk mitigation.
Which perfectly transitions into Section 5 of our outline, business strategy. Because having the best model doesn't matter if you can't build a sustainable business around it.
Right.
If developers can just route queries to whoever is cheapest or best at any given millisecond, how does anyone build a defensible moat? How do these three lock users like the listener into their ecosystems?
The lock-in strategies actually map perfectly to historical tech paradigms. We are essentially watching the AI equivalent of the operating system wars.
Okay, I love this analogy from the sources. Let's break it down. It's the ultimate lock-in effect. OpenAI wants to be Windows, Anthropic wants to be AWS, and DeepSeek wants to be Linux.
That is the exact framework. Let's start with OpenAI. Their play is ecosystem dominance. Used by millions daily, they want to be the default environment, like Windows.
Right, so you use it because it's already on your computer.
Yes. The brilliance of integrating deeply into Office and Azure is that you eliminate the friction of choice. A massive swath of the global workforce uses Microsoft. If GPT 5.4 is natively drafting their emails in Outlook and manipulating data in Excel, the switching costs become impossibly high.
Because if you have to export your data, open a new window, paste it into a different AI, copy the result, bring it back to your spreadsheet, you've already lost the user. Even if a competitor makes a better model, users stay because OpenAI is baked in.
Exactly. Convenience beats marginal performance gains almost every time. Now, Anthropic's play is completely different. They are playing the AWS Amazon Web Services game, enterprise monetization.
Running the secure backend of the internet.
Yeah. AWS doesn't have a flashy consumer interface. Most people have no idea they interact with it daily. By focusing on becoming the enterprise AI backbone, winning with developers and large companies, Anthropic is doing the same thing.
They don't want to be on my desktop. They want to be hardwired into my company's server architecture.
Yes. Once a massive bank builds its entire internal compliance and auditing pipeline around Anthropic's specific safety rails, they are not going to rip it out just because a competitor drops their price. The risk of disruption is too high.
So that's how Anthropic is currently winning the revenue growth race.
Exactly. They are proving that in 2026, the real money is in B2B, not consumer subscriptions.
Which leaves DeepSeek. And their play is cost leadership. They want to be Linux-free, open, and everywhere.
Precisely. DeepSeek's goal is to undercut competitors, scale globally, and leverage the open source community. By making high-level intelligence open and customizable, they aim to be the default engine running on servers everywhere.
Because if intelligence is essentially free, the only way to compete is to build the best application on top of it.
Right.
But, and this is a massive but, this entire business strategy competition assumes a free and open global market. And the sources reveal that geopolitics are violently splitting this market in half.
Yeah, the geopolitical chasm. You cannot separate the code from the hardware, and you cannot separate the hardware from global supply chains.
We are talking about the USA versus China AI war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
OpenAI and Anthropic represent the US-backed Western AI ecosystem. DeepSeek represents the Chinese ecosystem. And the key friction points here are chip restrictions, data sovereignty, and AI regulation.
So, despite DeepSeek's incredible efficiency and cost disruption, the sources suggest they are facing heavy regulation and trust issues in the West. Are we looking at a future where half the globe runs on cheap open-source Chinese AI and the other half runs on expensive premium American AI?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, that is a very real scenario. The future leadership may not be one winner, but two completely parallel ecosystems separated by digital iron curtains.
Let's talk about the physical bottleneck. For years, the narrative was that China's AI ambitions would hit a hard wall because the U.S. cut off their access to the most advanced microchips.
Right, the export controls.
But DeepSeek's success completely contradicts that. How are they training a 1.6 trillion parameter model without the premium silicon?
This is where constraint breeds innovation. While OpenAI and Anthropic have the luxury of throwing raw, brute force computing power at their models using massive clusters of American-designed chips, DeepSeek had to adapt. They are utilizing Chinese hardware, specifically chips from Huawei, to reduce dependence on U.S. tech.
But those domestic chips are theoretically less powerful, right?
In terms of raw benchmarks, yes. But DeepSeek compensated for the hardware deficit with extreme software optimization. That MOE architecture, the hyper-efficient routing, those weren't just clever business moves. They were engineering necessities.
So the chip restrictions actually forced them to become incredibly resilient.
Exactly. And because DeepSeek software is so highly optimized, it can run on cheaper or less efficient infrastructure. This makes them potentially dominant in developing countries where cost is the ultimate barrier.
Which brings up data sovereignty.
Precisely. Look at nations in the global south. If you are a government there, do you want to route all of your sensitive national data through servers controlled by Microsoft or Amazon, subject to U.S. jurisdiction?
Absolutely not. You want local control.
Right. And DeepSeek allows you to do that. They provide an open source model that is computationally efficient enough to run on local sovereign data centers. So the split isn't just Washington and Beijing. It's a massive portion of the world adopting the Chinese ecosystem because it's economically viable and independent from the U.S.
Wow. Okay, so taking all these technical, business, and political realities into account, where does the source material project we will be in the next decade? The race to AGI.
Let's look at the timeline. In the short term, so 1 to 3 years, the projection is that OpenAI keeps consumer dominance, Anthropic grows fastest in the enterprise sector, and DeepSeek expands globally via cost.
Pretty much an acceleration of what's happening right now. What about the medium term, like 3 to 7 years out?
Medium term, Anthropic actually becomes the most valuable AI company.
Really?
Yeah, because in a mature market, the company providing the indispensable, risk-free infrastructure for global finance and healthcare commands the highest premium. OpenAI stays the most used, but DeepSeek firmly becomes the Linux of AI. It's what the sources call a multi-winner world.
Similar to the coexistence of Apple, Microsoft, and Android, everyone gets a trillion-dollar slice of the pie.
Exactly.
But looking 10 years out, the ultimate tiebreaker is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. If someone achieves AGI, an AI that is as smart or smarter than a human in every field, does this Apple-Microsoft coexistence completely fall apart? Is AGI a winner-take-all button?
According to the final verdict in our sources, yes. AGI is a massive destabilizing force. If OpenAI achieves AGI first, their distribution advantage makes them the sole cognitive provider, platform dominance for everything.
And if Anthropic gets there first?
If Anthropic achieves safe AGI, they become the most trusted entity for governments and militaries. Their safety architecture becomes the bottleneck for global power.
But the wild card is DeepSeek. While Anthropic has momentum and OpenAI has the ecosystem, DeepSeek has the power to disrupt everything. If they democratize AGI and make it free and accessible, what happens?
It completely reshapes global power dynamics. If the ability to generate infinite cognitive labor is suddenly available to everyone for the cost of electricity, it destroys the moats of the Western tech giants instantly. It levels the playing field between massive superpowers and developing nations.
It's the ultimate reset button.
It really is.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. To summarize for the listener, the AI race is no longer just about who is smartest. It is a fragile balancing act of intelligence, safety, scale, and affordability. OpenAI gives you the platform, Anthropic gives you the trust, and DeepSeek gives you the accessibility.
It's a profound structural shift we're witnessing.
It absolutely is. We spent all this time looking at these three companies fighting to win your trust, your business, and your data. But here's something else to mull over as you go about your day. As these AI systems become deeply integrated into our operating systems, our corporate networks, and our national infrastructure, what happens to your agency? In 5 years, will you even get to choose which AI philosophy you align with? Or will your geography, your employer, and the hardware in your pocket invisibly make that choice for you? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Stay curious.